Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, As-salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen, Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima tu'allimna wa zidna bi fadlika 'ilman wa ta'liman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. So we didn't get very far in Usul so far. It says, wal ilmu darbani qadimun wa muhdath. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is innate knowledge, ours is acquired knowledge. فالقديم علم الله تبارك وتعالى وهو متعلق بجميع المعلومات ولا يوصف ذلك بأنه ضروري ولا مكتسب. It's not acquired nor is it necessary. It's totally different. والمحدث علم الخلق وقد يكون ذلك ضروريا وقد يكون مكتسبا. So again, this is helpful. This breakdown is useful. You say, oh, it's shirk to believe that somebody knows the ghaib. What do you mean? يعلم الغيب ضروري that. So what they mean is you can't know as Allah knows. But there's a difference to know as Allah knows and to know what Allah knows. They're not the same. Right? There's a totally different thing. To know what Allah knows is one thing, and to know as Allah knows is something else. So the issue is to know as Allah knows, not to know what Allah knows. Does that make sense? So a shirk, when you ascribe the sifa of Allah, Allah's knowing to somebody else. So you say, Inna Zaydan ya'lamu ma ya'lamuhu Allah kama ya'lamuhu Allah. That's shirk. As opposed to Inna Zaydan ya'lamu ma ya'lamuhu Allah ilman muhdathan. Right? Then there's no shirk anymore. Right? So the same thing. So there's certain things that like so what people will say is that there's some things that the difference between Allah and His creation is that Allah knows everything and they don't know everything. It's not the difference. The difference is not what they know, it's how they know. It is the fi'l that they do, not the maf'ul, not the object of that fi'l. فالضروري كل علم لزم المخلوق على وجه لا يمكنه دفعه عن نفسه بشك ولا شبهة وذلك كالعلم الحاصل عن الحواس الخمس. Right? So there's a difference between knowing the feeling and knowing the conclusion. Right? So for example, I feel hungry. That must mean I need food. That's just two different things. Right? So you say, do you have a sensation? For example, dislocated shoulder, okay? Dislocated shoulder, there's all these signals being emitted from these various different things in my shoulder, like 3 different places, and it goes into my upper arm. So I feel something in my upper arm. That doesn't mean there's actually something there, but I do know that I have a feeling. Okay, so you can question your conclusion, but you can't question the feeling. Right? So this is I think therefore I am, right? It's like I am experiencing thought. So therefore I am experiencing existence. I do exist one way or the other, right? الحاصل عن الحواس الخمس التي هي السمع والبصر والشم والذوق واللمس والعلم بما تواتر بأخبار من ذكر الأمة السالفة والبلاد النائية. Right? So I've never been to Australia, but I know it definitely exists. It is impossible that they're tricking me. Right? This is not the ultimate Truman Show. You know what I'm saying? Everyone knows what the Truman Show is?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah? I was about to say that Abdul Jalil might not know because he knows everything. Okay, anyway, Muhammad Hashi, you know the Truman Show? Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
Yeah? So there's only so much you can do with the Truman Show, right? It's only going to last a certain amount of time because we don't have the technology, right, to do that. Okay, you don't have the technology and the ability to pull off things like make Fareed Dingle think that Australia exists even though it doesn't. That's very difficult. وما يحصل به في النفس من العلم بحال نفسه. How do you feel? Feel sad? No, you don't. Well, I do. Okay, but there's no reason for you to feel sad, right? So I remember once I was traveling and I got so tired, I just felt like really depressed. I'm somebody who does not, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, I don't feel depression. It's not a thing that I kind of, but just one-off, like 10-minute depression. It was really weird. So you say you don't feel depressed. Well, I do feel depressed. Yeah, but there's no reason for you to feel depressed. Yeah, I know, but I do feel depressed. I do feel happy. I do feel anxious, right? وما يعلم من غيره من النشاط والكسل والفرح والغم والترح وخجل الخجل, right? The embarrassment of the embarrassed person. ووجل الوجل, and the fear of the person who's scared. وما يشبهه مما يضطر إلى معرفته, right? So we're not talking about inferences from this. We're just saying, I know that I feel happy, right? I know that I can feel something. It doesn't necessarily mean the thing is there, right? That's something else. Now there's more to do that, right? And so where do we discuss this, by the way? This is all discussed in Sharh al-Aqaid, right? Sharh al-Aqaid, and in Mantiq as well, right? Mantiq is not just how we play with information, it's also how we derive information, right? But so Sharh al-Aqaid begins how we know what we know, right? So not just the matan itself, but the sharh, the Taftazani on Sharh al-Aqaid. Says, وَالْمُكْتَسَبُ, that which is acquired, كُلُّ عِلْمٍ يَقَعُ عَنْ نَظَرٍ وَاسْتِدْلَالٍ, right? So notice we're going to define, somebody says a priori and post priori knowledge. It's not really, is it? So could you say like a priori is daruri? It's not the same, right? It's not really the same thing. You can't call it a priori and post priori. That's not really a definition. But here's one muktasab, you acquired this. 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 equals. Say that again. 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5. It's 25. So that's muktasab. You didn't know what it was, and then you knew what it was. Right? Okay. يقع عن نظر واستدلال كالعلم بحدوث العالم عفوا. Right? You got to think about it. وإثبات الصانع, you got to think about it. وصدق الرسل, you got to think about it. ووجوب الصلاة, you got to think about it. ووجوب الزكاة ونصبها وغير ذلك مما يعلم بالنظر والاستدلال, and other things of the world, right? فصل وحد الجهل تصور معلوم على خلاف ما هو عليه, right? That's called جهل. والظن تجويز أمرين أحدهما أظهر من الآخر كاعتقاد الإنسان فيما يخبر به الثقة أنه على ما أخبر به وإن جاز أن يكون بخلافه. Right? I say, Muhammad Hashir, tell me something about Kenya, and he says this. He may be mistaken, he may be lying, he may have forgot. But the zahir, right? That's called dhan, right? Or you say statistically, no, do you think it's going to rain today? Yes. Okay. So given A, B, and C, it's most likely going to rain today, given statistics. Right? وظن الإنسان في الغيم المشف الثخين أنه يجيء منه مطر, right? وإن جوز أن ينقشع عن غير مطر واعتقاد المجتهدين فيما يفتون به من مسائل الخلاف وإن جوزوا أن يكون الأمر بخلاف ذلك وغير ذلك مما يقطع به. So the issue is القطع بالمظنون, right? People, they don't know what they know and they don't know what they think, right? And that's very important. This is a problem in certain modern Muslims, right? And it's also a problem with scientism. So scientism, they don't have the category of dhan. That doesn't exist. They just talk about everything as if I know, but they don't know, right? So like, oh, we know this, we know this. Like a lot of these things are we don't know. So for example, scientifically, would it make sense? Like, so let's say evolution, for example, it's obvious. Look how similar we are to apes. We know that we evolved from apes. So it's not true. That's dhan, right? So let's say forget revelation. Just as a scientist looking at science, do you know that dinosaurs actually walked on planet Earth? No, but it would be that's تجويز أمرين أحدهما أظهر من الآخر, right? You look at the fossil record, and it looks like the Earth has been around for a long time, like millions of years, okay? Thousands of millions of years, right? That's what it looks like. It looks like there's such thing as called evolution. It looks like dinosaurs actually walked on the Earth. And it looks like that there's these things called mammals that evolved. And it looks like that they evolved from natural selection, but that's also actually challenged, right, by people like my brother in his capacity as a researcher and a doctor, and that the role of symmetry in that, for example. So it looks like this, and it looks like that, and it looks like these mammals evolved, and it looks like apes, and that humans are part of that family, and that would make sense, right? But that's called dhann. That's called dhann. It's not called ilm. So when you start to say, we know that that's the case, there's a problem. That's just not even true, right? We know about electrons. You don't know about electrons. You notice certain things that behave in certain ways, but you've never seen an electron, and you don't know really what the real nature of electron is. So okay, we know what a proton is. Okay, we don't really know, like the nature of mass. I mean, so what should happen with the theory of the relativity? It should make you extremely humble, because you realize now you don't know anything. Right? Everyone's following? Like when you realize that not all objects, that speed is not always relative. Like that seems like an absolutely fundamental, obvious thing to every single person. That if you shoot a bullet at somebody at 500 miles an hour, and they are in a plane going 500 miles an hour, that the relative speed is zero. That the bullet will never hit the plane. That is something that seems qata'i. It seems categorical, and it should apply to all matter and all space and all time. But then it doesn't, does it? Through the theory of relativity, disproved that and showed that some things, speed of light is not relative. So that totally destroys so many things that seemed absolutely cardinal and historical fact. Like there's a fact it's not possible. So when somebody learns something like that, right, they uncover something like that, it should be very humble, and it should make them think, and it should make them be able to start questioning many things that they have in their mind as categorical. But it's not, it's the opposite, unfortunately. Archaeology, right? Somebody comes along and says, don't be stupid. How did aliens build the what's it called? How did aliens build the pyramids? We've never seen aliens. Well, I don't believe in aliens, but I'm just saying there's a lot that we look at history, there's a lot that we don't understand about history. The default is we don't understand history. We don't understand how the pyramids were made, when they were made, amongst a bunch of other things. There's so much that we don't know about nature, about science, about everything, right? There's actually a whole book on this. It's called, I'll try and share it. It's called How We Don't Know. Something like, so it's a very funny book, but it's a good book to do, right? To look at, and like just things we don't know about science. So we might be able to manipulate things, right? Someone like, for example, in Muhammad Hashi's world, you're manipulating certain things, but you don't actually understand what's going on. Right? So, for example, we manipulate gravity, but we don't understand what gravity is. So there's a big difference between manipulating, for example, like, storing electrons in electron wells, but we don't actually understand what an electron is. So we might be able to manipulate things, but we don't know what they really are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Khair. So this whole thing is the dhann and ilm is very, very important. Right? والشك تجويز أمرين لا مزية لأحدهما على الآخر كشك الإنسان في الغيم غير المشف أن يكون منه مطر أم لا. So 50-50. وشك المجتهد فيما لم يقطع به من الأقوال don't know وغير ذلك من الأمور التي لا يغلب فيه أحد التجويزين على الآخر not sure could be A could be B I don't know right. So I'm not sure if he's going to come here. So Baydawi in the Minhaj, he mentions this issue is like, is fiqh dhanni or is fiqh like, is it ilm? Right? So he says fiqh is actually ilm. It's not like, it's not dhann. Okay, well, how do you know that? I mean, basically most of fiqh is dhanni. So yeah, fiqh is dhanni, right, in itself, but it's ilm in reality. So well, how? Because you know, as a mufti, that يجب عليك العمل بالظن. You know, as a fact, that you have to act upon what's most likely in your opinion. So you're looking at two scenarios, A or B, you're going back forward, A or B, and A is 0.0001 chance more likely than B. Okay, so the issue then is, I don't know which is, I don't know a stronger, but I do know that I think that one is stronger than the other. I do know that I think that one is stronger, and I do know that if I think that one is stronger than the other, I cannot possibly act on one at the cost of the other. So therefore, I have knowledge that I have to give this fatwa. Does that make sense? As a doctor, I don't know what the patient has, but it is more likely the patient has X and then Y. And if the patient has X then Y, I don't know what to do, but it is more likely that it would be more useful to do A than B. So I have to do A, even though I don't know that this cure will work and I don't know what the patient has. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? My 3-year-old son ran into a maze and went in direction A or B. I don't know which direction he went in. But as a parent who cares for the safety of the child and going to try and find this child, it doesn't make any sense to go in the less likely direction. So even though I don't know, I do know that I have to go in the most likely direction. Otherwise, I would be acting in a crazy way, right? So that doesn't make any sense, right? خير. And then he says باب النظر والدليل. Says والنظر هو الفكر في حال المنظور فيه وهو طريق إلى معرفة الأحكام إذا وجد بشروطه ومن الناس من أنكر النظر وهذا خطأ لأن العلم يحسن بالحكم عند وجوده فدل على أنه طريق له. So in reality this is really important, right? It's very important, another, right? So this is basically we have to stimulate our own midlife crises, if that makes sense. The younger the younger you have your own midlife crisis, the better, right? So you're supposed to have a midlife crisis at 12, 13, 14, right? Meaning you realize the dunya isn't worth it. You realize that you start thinking, does God exist or not? Is Islam true or not? You start questioning your things and you come to conclusions. And that basically when that break happens, the sooner the break happens, the better. The later it happens, the worse, right? So that's obviously on a bigger level, but things like making sure people think, is Islam true or not? The earlier you do that, the better, right? So then they're building their life on a post-realization as opposed to a pre-realization, right? And similarly, the person, I know this is the true, this hadith, the Salafi who need to open his eyes to things like, well, actually, the end of the day, all of this is dhanni. And he's like, no, sahih, it's true. Like, well, sahih doesn't mean true, it means most likely true. And even when you said it's sahih, there's many things. So opening people's eyes to this nazar is very important, right? وهو الفكر في حال المنظور فيه وهو طريق إلى معرفة الأحكام إذا وجب شروطه. At the same time, you also cannot devoid people of structure, right? So if you just open the door on a child and don't guide them in any way whatsoever, everything is open. Let's discuss existence at the age of 12. And let's discuss gender at the age of 12. And everything is open. Who knows? So you need to make, so similarly for somebody who has like imagine if there was no madhahib, like what on earth would you do? Nobody had organized the Quran and Sunnah for you. It's actually really problematic because in principle you can do ijtihad. In practice, it's extremely hard. So it's actually a huge benefit for somebody to come along and say A, B, and C. Structure is actually very, very useful. But structure does not mean taqleed. Structure means I'm going to lean on this structure while thinking. Does that make sense? Right? So, for example, you're in Islamic school, basically open up questions. How do I know I exist? How do I know things exist? How do I know what about the world? What do I know about the world? How do I know what exists? How do I know Islam is true? That's good. And you guide them bit by bit to the Ash'ari Aqidah. Here's the 13 points that you believe, and here's an argument, and they independently accept it. Like, yeah, that makes sense. But you didn't just leave it totally open, right? Similarly, like with a Salafi, like, okay, who knows? And now it's actually you kind of get despair. Like things are so chaotic. I don't know what to rely on, right? So you look, there's more than one way of looking at things. Here is a good organization of things. Just follow this madhab, this Hanafi school, this Maliki school, the Shafi school, until you find something else, right? Until you have real tarjih of something else, right? Then you can go and follow something else, right? And just open things up. You have to give somebody, you got to give. So you can't just destroy people, right? You can't say like, break something and don't give somebody an alternative because it's emotionally very difficult. وأما شروطه فأشياء منها أن يكون الناظر كامل الآلة. You're not, right? So this is not real nazar, right? Like last night we were looking at questioning whether or not the ma'mumeen should say the adhan, say ameen aloud, right? And we demonstrated in the Muntaqa, there's no real evidence. I mean, no crystal clear evidence. So what you find with a populace of people who are Salafi or who are unintentionally Salafi is that you've democratized knowledge without educating the masses. Democracy doesn't work without mass education. And there's other conditions for democracy as well. So what you've done is you've democratized knowledge. Nobody's following anybody in principle, but in reality they are, right? So Salafism, to some way, is exactly Animal Farm, because you basically made people think that they're Kamil al-Ala, but they're not. So that was an example. Basically, it was like there's no clear Sahih hadith that the Ma'mum says Ameen aloud, but yet most people, when they do Nadhar, apparently when they're Salafi, they'll do it. So if it were the case at least that there was a Sahih hadith in Muslim and the Zahir of it was that would be great, but there isn't. It's kind of like an ijtihad of Shafi'is and Hanbalis based on certain athar and certain evidence and certain assumptions. It's not crystal clear. So if the Salafi community were actually independently thinking, you would imagine that they have two opinions on it, but they don't. So it tells us that we have is basically taqleed in reality, and people who do nazar and who are not kamil al-ala. They haven't actually read the sources. They haven't read, and they're not able to read. على ما سنذكره في باب المفتي إن شاء الله تعالى, right? All right, so you have to be kamil al-ala. Right, go ahead, Jawad.
Isn't it actually a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim that when the Imam says Ameen, say Ameen?
Yeah, but what does they say Ameen aloud?
And wouldn't the implication be, I guess now we're getting into implications then, huh?
Exactly, it's not clear. So say Ameen doesn't say it aloud necessarily. It's not clear. And in reality, the proof of the Shafi'is is that it's like it was done by some of the Salaf. Okay, well, that means some of the Salaf didn't do it, right? So we kind of like, it's implied to some extent it's done by some of the Salaf, but other Salaf did not do it. So it's not ijma', the point is it's not very clear. The kind of deleels that they work with, right, is like, you're crazy, you don't join prayers, but in Sahih Muslim it says Prophet doing prayers. Like that kind of thing where at least it's zahir. It's not zahir. It's implied indirectly, according to some scholars, based on some amal, right? So the point is it's not it was and the point I made in the class last night was it was on Claude, whatever, like Chat GPT it or Google it. Like whenever you see Google answering something in a certain way, that means like this is what the masses are saying, and it's actually wrong, or it just indicates where the masses are. Like they're not actually thinking, they're not actually critical thinking. It's not so. Salafism should be a da'wah to mass critical thinking and mass re-examination of weak proofs in the form of madhahib. That's fantastic, right? And not having ta'assub, which is fantastic, but it's not actually what's happening, right? It's not actually what's happening. الثاني أن يكون نظره في دليل لا شبهة فيه. والثالث أن يستوفي شروط الدليل ويرتبه على حقه ويقدم ما يجب تقديمه ويؤخر ما يجب تأخيره. So basically he actually knows how to function properly. Right? And this is one of the important things of writing as well. Like when you write, like sometimes in my head, just speaking more emotionally, right? I have an argument in my head. Can you just write it out? And you start to see that it doesn't make sense. Like organize your argument fully, right? Express your argument fully. Like what exactly are you saying? It's very important to do that. And it actually takes a long time. It takes a long time for mature opinions to come. Very difficult. And one of my teachers at university, he said, they're talking about Sibawayh when he was born and when he died. And allegedly, it said that he's 35. So the teacher was like, this is impossible. A 35-year-old book does not write a book like Kitab Sibawayh. It just doesn't happen. Like 35-year-olds don't think like that. Right. Like there's a lot of things that, Imam Malik, he said, like, he once narrated the Muwatta to somebody in 4 days. He said, a book that I took 40 years cracking. You've narrated it in 4 days. Like it's just not like that. Things take time. We take time to download under things, right? So even AI can collect facts and statistics very, very quickly, but it doesn't understand what it is. It's just statistical, right? It's just doing numbers, it's cracking numbers and systems and statistical, it doesn't actually understand. So understanding is quite difficult, actually. Understanding things, if you have to organize things properly. وأما الدليل فهو المرشد إلى المطلوب ولا فرق في ذلك بين ما يقطع به من الأحكام وبين ما لا يقطع به. Right? It's both كل دليل. وقال أكثر المتكلمين لا يستعمل دليل إلا فيما يؤدي إلى علم. فأما ما يؤدي إلى نظر فلا يقال له دليل وإنما يقال له أمارة. وهذا خطأ لأن العرب لا تفرق في التسمية بين ما يؤدي إلى العلم أو الظن فلم يكن لهذا الفرق وجه. وأما الدال فهو الناصب للدليل وهو الله عز وجل وقيل هو والدليل واحد كالعالم والعليم والله أعلم. والمستدل هو الطالب للدليل ويقع ذلك على السائل لأنه يطلب الدليل من المسؤول ويقع على المسؤول لأنه يطلب الدليل من الأصول. والمستدل عليه وهو الحكم الذي هو التحليل. Right? So all of these things, they seem really stupid, like it's just pedantic. But pedanticism makes sense when you talk to stupid people, right? Like, for example, people don't know the difference between the dalil and the dalil, or they don't know the difference between part of the dalil and the dalil, right? So again, for a Salafi, and I hate picking on Salafis, but like the hadith is a dalil. The hadith is not a dalil. A dalil is a syllogism. It's an argument. That's part of the dalil. So what you do with the major premise is one thing. There's a minor premise and there's a conclusion. But they're just looking at, for example, that the minor premise is the conclusion. So the minor premise is neither the argument, nor is it the proof, nor is it the conclusion. Like it's like, and it does become problematic. So speak to stupid people and pedanticism will make sense, right? So Jawad, for example, talking to me, like I don't understand anything about computers. So he actually has to be pedantic, right? Pedantic means as a teacher speaks, right? Going through the details. It is actually very important. Okay, بيان الفقه وأصول الفقه. Inshallah, we'll come to this next week. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. So again, when I say Salafi, I don't mean Salafis are bad. I'm not trying to say anything. The movement in essentially is fantastic. Accidentally, right? Accidentally is terrible, right? So, but in terms of what it is, it's a fantastic movement. In terms of how it is played out, it's terrible, right? Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.